Welcome to day 17 of our Lenten Bible study on the Gospel of Mark. We are today going to start Mark chapter 7. Now, before we start Mark chapter 7, a very quick recap of what's happened till now in the Gospels. Mark is writing to a persecuted church, a persecuted Roman church. He's also writing to a Jewish church that is undergoing persecution by Rome. And they are basically asking these four questions in the Gospel of Mark. Question number one: if Jesus is Lord, why then are we being persecuted? Question two: if Jesus is the Messiah, why did the Jerusalem temple fall? Question three: if Jesus was the Messiah, why did he have to die? And question number four: why did the Jews not accept him, and how do the Gentiles belong? We have seen in Mark chapter 1 to 6 that Jesus burst onto the scene and he does wonders after wonders, and yet the people are not able to grasp who he is. The demons are able to say who Jesus really is, but not his apostles, not his family, not the Jews, and even worse, there are those who will condemn Jesus and call and say that he's working under the power or he's working with Beelzebul, the devil himself. And so we see right up to now, nobody has recognized who Jesus is. And so there is tension building in the Gospel of Mark. But until now, we see that Jesus has begun his ministry, he's gone to the Gentiles, and there are many Gentiles who are beginning to now recognize who Jesus is. They yet do not grasp that he is the Messiah. But they're beginning to grasp who Jesus really is. We are here where Jesus has done one of the greatest miracles. He's fed over 10 to 15,000 people. And if someone gives us a banquet as great as that, the whole world would know it really soon. And so everyone knows what Jesus has done. Now we see in Mark chapter 7 a confrontation happening between the Pharisees and Jesus. Okay, let's read. Mark chapter 7, verse 1. Now, when some of the Pharisees and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered around him, they noticed that some of his disciples were eating with defiled hands, and that is without washing them. Before we get into the explanation of the text, Mark chapter 7, verses 1 to 23 can be divided into three parts. The first part is Mark chapter 7, verses 1 to 5, that is the accusation of the Pharisees. Next, we have the critique of empty religion. And finally, we have the revelation by Jesus about true impurity. Some of the persecuted non Jews, Gentiles who are followers of Jesus, are asking, how does the law, how does these uh, commandments that were given to the Jews in the Torah make sense to us? Also, the Torah are the first five books of the Bible. Now, the Jews believe that these five books were given to Moses directly by God, and within them was 613 commandments. Now, these 613 laws were already quite a few, but the Pharisees believed that even though this Torah, the first five books were a written tradition, God gave Moses an oral tradition, and this oral tradition was to help them in order to keep the written tradition. So they made many other laws in order to make sure that people kept the 613 laws. Now, these resulted in hundreds and hundreds of more laws being attached to the written law. In fact, they would not always call the oral law a law, they would call it the tradition. There was the written law, and then there were the oral traditions that they had to practice. And that is what Jesus is being challenged here to. Now, these oral traditions spread into every aspect of their life. For example, the Sabbath. Along with keeping the Sabbath holy, there were another 39 categories of forbidden work that they were not supposed to do on the Sabbath. Then there were purity laws, which included the washing of hands, the washing of utensils, vessels, etc. Then there were dietary restrictions, what people were allowed to eat and not allowed to eat. Then there were tithing and ritual practices, and all these formed the oral tradition. And so these were not bad. But notice what happened. These laws were not given for all the common people. For example, the washing of the hands, the ritual cleaning was given for the priest in the temple. The priest in the temple had to wash their hands before serving in the sanctuary. There were certain ritual impurities that required washing before re entering the Jewish community. However, the Pharisees believed that every Jewish home should be lived with the same holiness of the temple. And so they expanded this to every aspect of human life, in the temple, in the house, at the work, and everywhere. Yes, holiness should be practiced everywhere. But this reason, This cause for practicing holiness became a burden for people, and then people began to get classified into those who were pure and to those who were impure. Ordinary people, the poor, those who were constantly working, would find it extremely difficult to maintain these religious complex purity rituals. And so then we see the fragmentation of the Jewish society. And so the confrontation. They come and possibly watch that Jesus and his disciples are eating. They have not washed their hands. And they come and they confront Jesus and they ask him this question in verse 5. Why do your disciples not live in according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands? Interestingly, they are not accusing Jesus of breaking the law, but they are accusing Jesus of breaking the tradition. And so you can see the burden on the people to uphold the law and to uphold the tradition. Now, Jesus' response, verse number 6. He said to them, Isaiah prophesies rightly about you hypocrites, as it is written, the people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. You abandon the commandments of God and hold to human tradition. During the 8th century BC, during the time of Isaiah, Judah was threatened by the Assyrian Empire. And what the people did was they ran to make alliances with all different kingdoms. They did not place their trust in the Lord. They would go to the temple and they would worship and they would say, God is great and our God is mighty and God can do all things. But their lives did not resonate what they prayed in the temple. Their lives did not resonate what was on their lips. And therefore, Isaiah says, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far away from me. And so Jesus is telling the scribes and the Pharisees who are here, like at the time of Isaiah, your religion has become hollow. You have no love for God. You are just maintaining a religious system. We see that in verse number 8, where he says, you abandon the commandments of God and hold on to human tradition. You see, we can also be sometimes part of this. We sin, but we don't feel that it is wrong. Sometimes we gossip, but we come from Maas, bindas, chalta hai. That chalta hai attitude is what Jesus that chalta hai attitude is what Jesus is condemning here. He's not saying, he's not offended by their sin. He's offended by their hardness of the heart. He's not offended by the fact that they have fallen and they've fallen short of the glory of God. But he's angry at them because they do not see that they have fallen short of the glory of God. They sin but don't know that they live in sin, and that is a sign of pride, and pride closes the heart, and that is what offends Jesus. Then he said to them, you have a fine way of rejecting the commandments of God in order to keep the tradition. Then you come down to verse 11, he says, there are those who tell their parents, whatever support you might have had from me is Corban, that is an offering to God. Now, what some people would do is they would, instead of helping their parents, say this money is Corban. And after saying the money is Corban, they would not give it to the church, but they would keep it for themselves. And Jesus is saying this is the hypocrisy of the law, that in order to avoid your responsibilities, you are calling the money Corban, but not giving it to the temple. And they look like they are upholding the tradition, they look like they are upholding the law, but what they are doing is destroying the human being. And that is what Jesus is against. We also see this right in our lives, where sometimes prayer can become an excuse. I have to go for prayer meeting, so I don't have time for home. Or public philanthropy, where someone wants to give money to those outside, but the ones in the house are suffering. Also, avoiding inconveniences. There is a rising trend among families very often who don't want to have children because in their heart of heart they know that it is an inconvenience, and the inconvenience is that you've got to now give your life to someone else. You've got other dreams of roaming the world, going for holidays, etc., etc., and it becomes difficult. Dear brothers and sisters, you will always note that the fullness of life is not when you enjoy your own life, but the fullness of life is found when you give it up for somebody else, when you surrender your life for someone else. Is it difficult? Of course it is difficult. Is it worth it? Of course it is worth it. See, life is not easy. Jesus never promised an easy life, but in the Gospel of John, he promises a life of abundance, and the life of abundance is only found in giving it up for someone else. The greatest joy is found not in ourselves, not in receiving, but in giving our life to someone else. Okay? Verse 14. Then he called the crowd again and said to them, listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that by going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile. Now, this is shocking to Jewish ears. I can imagine the scribes and the Pharisees there wanting to pull out their hair after listening to this, because all these years, their facade of holiness came from practicing externally. Now, external practices are not bad. Please don't think that I'm saying external practices are bad. But their facade came from the out because they showed everyone that they were holy. Holiness comes from inside, and external practices help the internal life. But however, here Jesus is saying, all your eating of this food that is unclean, don't do this, don't do that, wash your hands. It is not that what goes inside that defiles a person, but what is in the heart and that which comes out of a person that defiles him. We see this in verse 23. All these evil things come from within and they defile a person. And so we are seeing that the barrier between the Jews and the Gentiles is beginning to fall. Also, for Mark's Gentile community, this was a monumental statement. Remember the question the audience of Mark are asking, how do the Gentiles belong? And we see that Jesus is continuously breaking barriers. Also, what Jesus is trying to point out and say is that evil is not caused by necessarily what goes in, but by what comes out of a person. The source of all evil is the human heart. And Jesus sees something much deeper, that the human heart itself is wounded. When we say that the human heart is wounded, we are saying that the human heart is finding pleasure in all other things, or is seeking pleasure in all other things but in the Lord. You see, when our hearts are wounded, they are empty. They are empty of meaning, they are empty of purpose, they are empty of joy, they are empty of love. And this emptiness in the heart, we try to fill with different kind of pleasures. And we've seen this challenge here in our lives, in our world, where we seek pleasure after pleasure, and endless pleasure is its own form of suffering. Like we are looking and looking and looking for joy in all these wrong places. And after looking for joy in all these wrong places, we come out empty, and then we keep seeking and looking for it more. It is one terrible, terrible, endless cycle. For example, you take food, you have a huge pizza, you eat the first two slices, great joy. But as you eat the third and the fourth, there is fading satisfaction. And then you eat a few more slices, and that becomes its own kind of suffering. That which brought you great joy now becomes its own kind of suffering. And then once it's digested, and then you feel a little more empty inside again, and then you go out once again looking for food, and then you look for more satisfaction, and the cycle keeps repeating itself. I wonder if you've ever got up in the night, you've just had a meal, but you still feel that something is empty on the inside. You want a food or you want a drink. That, my dear brothers and sisters, is not an emptiness. That is not hunger in the stomach. That is the emptiness of the heart. That is the Lord speaking to you and saying, you need me in your life. There are so many examples which we can give. Sometimes we shop and shop and shop and shop because we think it will bring us joy. But the moment we finish, we go back to shopping. Why is that? It's because our hearts are telling us you need God in the heart. You can fill your house with great and wonderful things, but the emptiness of the heart only the Lord can fill. Take more examples, take social media. The more you scroll, the more you suffer. You don't like it, but you still do it. Why? With the hope that you will receive some joy. And that hope is again the Lord telling you, Baba, you need me in your life. We see the Pharisees and the scribes understood the condition of the broken heart, and they tried to fix it with external regulations. And they know, and we know, that external regulations don't fix our broken hearts. It is only God's grace that can transform and renew the human heart. It is only God's love and God's mercy that can restore to us our broken hearts, that can fill in us the emptiness of our souls. And therefore, the best way is to return to the Lord. The ultimate fulfillment is found only and only in Jesus. And therefore, I say this to everybody. You want to begin experiencing that greater joy? Where do you begin? Begin at the Eucharist. The Eucharist is the source and the summit of Christian life. It is only there that our deepest human desires are fully addressed. And therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, find every reason to go and meet the Lord in the Eucharist. You see, very often we make excuses for not going for Mass. Sometimes we find genuine reasons why we cannot go for Mass. But you see, when we've all had these experiences when we really want to do something. We will find every excuse to do it, and therefore find every excuse to go and attend the celebration of the Eucharist. And there is the beginning of finding great fulfillment in the Lord. Okay, with this we come to the end. Tomorrow we shall complete Mark chapter 7. So until then, we pray for each other. God bless you. Keep me and my team in your prayers, and see you tomorrow.